The Hangar Z podcast welcomes pilot Tim Brennan of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
You know, something kind of almost out of the movies from what they describe, where they see the wall of water coming and it just sweeps them off the road and down into the wash. It was a minivan, actually had 3 elderly people in it, and it got swept down the river and then butted up against a tree in the middle of the wash.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and partnered with Vertical Valor magazine. In this 3-episode series, Jack Schonely and John Gray sit down with Tim Brennan, a pilot with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, to trace an extraordinary aviation journey shaped by service, leadership, and life-saving missions. Tim shares what it was like growing up in a small town in North Idaho, the first flight that changed his life, and the path that led him to become an Army aviator, including a deployment to Afghanistan. He also reflects on his time at Quantum Helicopters, progressing from instructor to chief flight instructor, before moving into his current role with Maricopa County. In episode 3, the conversation culminates in a gripping account of an incredible swift water rescue, offering a first-hand look at the skill, teamwork, and split-second decisions required to save lives from the air. It is a story you will not want to miss. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Hangar Z, and please share with your friends and coworkers. We appreciate all of your support. Thank you to our sponsors, Shotover Systems, Metro Aviation, and Dallas Avionics.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
So from Korea, you get to go to UCLA, the upper corner of Lower Alabama, right?
That's right.
And off to Fort Rucker.
Yep.
But that year, I mean, obviously, as disappointed as you were, are there things you look back on and go, you know what, I'm thankful for that year?
Yeah, especially where I'm at now. I mean, you know, you never know what God's plan is for you. And it's not till you get years down the road, sometimes decades, that you look back and you go, okay, now I understand why. You know, if I didn't do this, then this wouldn't have happened. And all those little branches in the decision tree chain don't end up leading to where you want to be, which I couldn't be happier where I'm at now. But every one of those little hiccups, every one of those little deviations gets you to where you end up are now. So I look back on it, I am thankful for the time there, you know, especially after I got selected, because that was a huge weight off my shoulders. I mean, The first 3 months I was there, every day was like, what do I got to do? How do I make sure I get in? Who do I need to talk to? Because if I didn't work then I was done. I'd have to finish my time as a regular med officer and get out or try some other way. So thankfully it worked out. And after that, I was able to relax. And then, you know, it was a bummer not having to finish the year, but I got to travel all over Asia. So, you know, you had a group of friends, and Korea is not like the active normal army, right? It is a presence army. So it's there just to be a presence to deter anything from the North Koreans doing anything. So you're kind of just hanging out, you know, you do your training, maintain readiness, but there's a 4-day weekend every month, and you're traveling all over all over East Asia. So, you know, I went places, you know, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, Philippines, places I'll never go to now, more than likely. But, you know, I made the most of it while I was there, which I'm thankful for. You know, it was really cool experiences, and met some good friends I still talk to from there.
Sure.
And you know, it's just part of my journey now.
Love that experience you talk about. It reminds me of law enforcement in so many ways. And I'll get back to that in a second. But you said something that piqued my interest. You talked about God's timing and not understanding how that plays in the larger picture. And of course, you don't know in the moment. My son this year tried out for the JV soccer team, and he worked his tail off and got cut. And it was heartbreaking for him, and it was heartbreaking for us as parents, you know. And I told him, I said, son, all I know is God's timing's perfect, and we don't understand why, you know, until later. Yeah. Rewind to last night. just found out last night he's been they asked him to join the team.
Oh,
in the
great.
middle of that, he was volunteering, keeping stats. He was the videographer for the team. He got to travel with the team and do all the stuff. So he got to experience this whole side of that team that he wouldn't have otherwise gotten to experience, which is really cool.
That is
He
cool.
got the volunteer hours that he can now add to his college application. Just the really cool experiences. So to your point, you just don't know how these experiences you have in the face of what seems like a huge letdown really benefits you in the end. But in law enforcement, you think about all the special assignments you apply for and don't get, or the promotions that you test for and don't get. And in the moment, you're like, holy cow. I talked to a lot of folks who didn't get the promotion they expected to get. And there's folks who are like, I'm not testing again. I'm like, why would you do that? You have to test every time. If you don't test, you're throwing your resignation in and you're saying no for yourself. Yeah. So if you're listening and you've been told no for a special assignment or for a promotion, think about what Tim talked about and use that as a way to better yourself and prep more for this next experience. And we talk about for the TFOs in aviation, the more experience you have in the field, the better prepared you are. So that 1 extra year or 2 extra years you might spend in the field doing whatever that next thing is, or the current thing is you're doing until you get another chance to test for aviation, and take advantage of that and just excel, So thank you, Tim, for going through that. I love that story. It's super inspirational.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and in the moment, it's always hard to see that and remind yourself of that. It's easy to despair. And I'm the first to tell you, I was very bummed out. I was really sad, depressed, and did everything to deal with it, that you could imagine. So it was, but the next day you wake up and you just say, okay, what's the next step? And as long as you don't quit on that goal, I always tried to look at it like, I'm going to let them tell me no. I'm not going to tell myself no. So if I do everything I can in my power and it's a no, I did everything I could. But if it's me, I don't want to make excuses for myself. I'm just going to not bother trying. Well, you're only going to have yourself to blame for that in the end. So
yeah, that's the lesson here. I mean, everyone gets disappointed. Nobody gets everything they want in life when they apply. And it's how you react to it. Everybody's disappointed. Everybody's bummed. Everybody's sad. But it's how you wake up the next day and act. Mm-hmm. I love that Teague did that and volunteered. And he showed, I want to be a part of this team. I guarantee you that the fact that he did that ended up being a factor in him getting brought back to the team. Yeah. There's other people that get told, oh, you didn't make the cut. And they just kick dirt and they're pissed off and they go, I'm not, like you said, John, I'm not applying again, or they start bad mouthing the organization that they were trying to join or whatever. And when the next time comes around, they're not going to be selected because people see that. People see, well, he gave up or he lashed out, instead of saying, okay, I'm disappointed, but what can I do next time? I mean, I always saw it with like tactical flight officers that were applying. The ones that didn't get it, we always watched them, and with pilot too. If they didn't get it, how did they react? Did they come to you and say, what could I do better in that oral for next time? That's the guy I want to come back to the oral, right? It's not the one that's kicking dirt and pissed off. So great lesson from both John's son and from you, Tim. They're really, really valuable. Really valuable.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's cool.
Yeah. How was Fort Rucker overall?
Man.
Is there something that jumps out at you? I mean, every Army aviator that we've spoken to, has talked a little bit about Fort Rucker and very similar things, but everybody's a little bit unique in how they looked at it. What was your perspective on it?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned the uniqueness, because I've listened to quite a few Army aviators, and I'm big, Mike Durant, Alan Mack, they're big heroes of mine, especially having to get especially when Mr. Alan Mack, flying infamous for the Tora Bora battle and actually getting to fly over that battlefield when I was in Afghanistan, has that small connection. But it's funny hearing different people's backgrounds and stories. Mine, I guess I'll preface it that, when I got to flight school, it had recently changed the overall formatting of it in a way. So in the post-Vietnam era, the 70s, the 80s, there was a period of, downsizing, cutting troops, minimizing everything. But from what I understand, after my experience at Rucker, the flight school formatting hadn't really changed a ton until the early 2000s. So, the average student was getting anywhere from 220 to 250 flight hours. They were soloing. They were doing buddy flights where you had two students flying with each other on cross countries, day, night, NVGs. They were doing instrument. I mean, they were really, it seemed, compared to what I experienced, much more thorough. And the mindset in that previous format of flight school seemed like, we're here to train pilots in command. The expectation is that you're going to leave here and you could go to your unit and then act as a pilot in command. You're going to go through transition with your unit. You're going to learn the local area SOPs, tactics, and you're going to get checked out, but it will happen relatively quickly. And I just listened to Mike Duran on another podcast, Sean Ryan show, and he talked about that same experience. I listened to
it too. Yeah, I listened to every minute of that. That was amazing.
Yeah, and when I was in pre-4 going to flight school, I read his book, In a Company of Heroes, and I loved that he went through his flight school experience and early flying career before he joined the 160th, because I was like, man, that's awesome. If I could do that, I'm smart, I'm dedicated, motivated. I'll bet I could be one of those guys that early on goes to become a pilot in command and gets entrusted to operate the aircraft like the way he did. So I remember hearing his story going to Korea as a medevac pilot at 250 hours. And running missions. And I thought, oh, that's how it's going to be. That's what the Army does. Well, when I went through, they had, to save costs, they had cut down almost half of the flight hours and supplemented it with simulator time.
Oh,
so when I went through, when I left, I only had about 130 total hours of flight training in a helicopter, including Black Hawk transition. So it felt like, compared to what I was expecting, the mindset had shifted to where, well, we're not going to spend the time and money to train pilots in command. We're going to just train you to be a co-pilot. Then your unit will fix you and finish you off. So the formatting when I went through was you actually started off, the first thing you had to do was dunker training. So you went through the helicopter over water survival training, and that's a 1-day class, and you get dunked underwater in the big tank. If nobody's seen it, look it up on YouTube, because for me, it was a traumatic experience. I'm not comfortable in the water. It's like my kryptonite. So that was the hardest thing about flight school for me. I got through it just fine the first day, but I was not comfortable. I was breathing. I was holding on for dear life to make it out.
I can relate to this. Relate to this. Ask anybody at Air Support about Jack and Dunker training. They laugh to this day. It's legendary. There's pictures of me holding on with my eyes wide open for dear life. I hated it. And it wasn't, and by the way, it wasn't even close to what you had to do in the military Dunker training. I'm talking about a PVC seat that's been pushed into a swimming pool. You're going in this big fuselage into being twisted and turned. And that's demanding. I mean, there's a good reason for it. I think you would agree, but not everybody's a swimmer, and not everybody's, some people are claustrophobic, and it's hard. It's hard. That's funny that was the big thing for you, the big toughest part.
Yeah, and my big takeaway was just don't fly over the water. So I never wanted to get stationed in Hawaii after that. I avoided flying over large lakes. I just fly the shoreline. I was like, I don't even want to deal with that potential. So
it's good you didn't go the Navy or Marine route, huh?
No, that would have been, I both dodged a bullet there. So.
They're like, that's a 1-hour flight. Why'd it take you 3 hours to get here? Why to go
I was just being safe. That's all I was doing.
That's right.
So that was a 1-day thing. So it just was hard to get in, because every day they don't schedule you. You just show up at the building at 4 a.m. and they take the first 25 people in line. So I think it took me a week or two. I just started getting up early and earlier, and then stand outside the door until they let you in. It was pretty unorganized. How they went about it. But once you get that, you get your certificate, and then you go back to the student company and you say, hey, I did Dunker, I'm ready for SEER school. And they say, okay. They put you on a wait list. And then I had to wait about a month to get a spot in SEER school. So in the meantime, and flight school always has these hold periods. So there's, 1,000 flight students for any given spots, and they only have a certain amount. So everybody gets jammed up in this funnel as they just kind of let everybody trickle into individual spots. So you had a lot of dead time in between things. So you were just doing BS details, answering phones. I was handing out towels in the gym for a week, like just stupid stuff.
Yeah. Army stuff.
So, but the next phase is SEER school. And what they used to do all that at the end, but what was happening was people were getting through flight training and then they'd have a handful to not make it through SEER school and they couldn't become aviators.
Yeah.
So they reorganized that flow. So now you had to do Dunker first, then SEER, and now you can go to flight slot. So
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
So SEER school was probably the best training I did in the Army. It's about 3 weeks, if I remember right. And, we're not supposed to talk about some of the details
Sure.
of it, but essentially you're learning, it stands for survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. So you go through that and you have different classes, different phases. You spend a bunch of time in the field learning all the survival skills. I mean, I wish I could remember most of it because it was cool stuff. Like, how to start fires out of nothing, catching fish with homemade fishing hooks, snares, traps. I mean, really useful survival skills. And then some of the tactical stuff they taught you was amazing. Like we had a few ranges that to this day were some of the best combo rifle, pistol, 2-gun ranges we did. If you got to evade, here's how you can shoot people and cover your buddy and, set up little one-man ambushes. I mean, it was cool stuff. So
Yeah.
Then you get the resistance part, which sucks, where you get to go to, prison camp and get the experience there. If you ever got captured, this is a taste of what it's going to be like. So that was awful, but,
Yeah.
but some of my best stories came out of going through there. I was fortunate to go through with my roommate. So he's on my SEER team. So we laugh. We still talk about some of the experiences running around the woods and dodging bad guys and getting captured.
Yeah.
It was fun after the fact, but
Sure. Well, Mike Durant, he talks about that school constantly.
Oh yeah.
And he credits that school with the reason he's alive. He said it was Sean Ryan. He talked about it again. I've heard him talk about it multiple times over the years, and that school made a difference for him. And I think he said on Sean Ryan something like he was the first person in modern history to actually use those techniques after Vietnam, to use those techniques in a situation like that. And it benefited him. Not only did you, like that school, but it gave you tools that you could use later if that ever did happen. And as an aviator, obviously your chances are greater of that happening than a non-aviator. Mm-hmm. That's cool. And was that school, was it at Rucker that you did it?
Yeah, they have a restricted area that they've kind of mapped off to where nobody outside's allowed in. You can't fly over it. It's a secret, but you can figure out pretty easily where it is. But
pretty cool.
But yeah, you go through that for 3.5 weeks, something like that. And then you learn the escape stuff tools. So you learn all the cool tricks to get out of bindings and handcuffs and how to pick stuff. And it's nice. It was an amazing school. Like I said, it was probably the best Army school I ever went through. And the guys who taught it, they were a big reason why it was so useful, was because most of them were retired special forces guys or, Rangers or guys that have worked in that field, the intelligence field. So they were very knowledgeable and really cared about you learning the material, because there is evidence in cases like Mike Durant, he was obviously a big part of the curriculum because there was so much information about his captivity. Yeah. And a lot of the other stuff. Yeah. A lot of the other stuff was from Vietnam,
Yep.
And it was spotty. The guys did their best in their debriefs, but they didn't have as much, fresh material like Mike had when Mr. Durant had when he came back. So, but yeah, once you get through that and, you recover a little bit and get back to waiting for a flight school spot. So after that, I think I waited about another month, and then thankfully I got put into a flight class, and then you show up, and the way the order of events essentially was, you start off in what they called primary training, which at the time they were using a Bell 206 B3 for that, the TH-57 they called it, as your primary trainer. And that lasted about 2 months. And the way to think of it is like it's your private rating, right? You're going to learn all the basics, fundamentals, emergency procedures. And then from there, you'll go into about 2 months of instrument training in a 206 B3 with the instrument cockpit. And then after that, you go through what they call the basic combat skills or basic warfighter skills, which is learning the tactical flying aspects, low-level navigation, aviator flying, how to use a map, charts, tactics for maneuvering in, denied terrain with the helicopter. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, my experience with was at first I thought I was going to hate flying because the instructors were just not the greatest. They were super knowledgeable, but man, they were freaking mean. So it was like flying with a boot camp instructor in the helicopter. So you can imagine you're trying to hover or take off and they're screaming at you. And I remember my guy for primary, he used to wear a class ring under his flight glove and he would hit you in the helmet with it. So every time you did something, and you're like, dude, you haven't even told me what the collective does, what the cyclic, I'm just doing things and you're mad at me about it. And I can still hear the sound in my helmet from his ring just popping me in the helmet. And, it got to the point where every time he moved his hand, he'd flinch because he's just like, don't hit me. So it was, I wish it would have been, if they, like I said, they were knowledgeable, but a lot of them were burned out. They were retired Army guys for the most part. They're on like their third career, their third or fourth divorce. They're just mad at the world. And then they get to come in and punk a bunch of flight school students all day and they love it. So it was really
lining up and paying to do that.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, I'm glad I'm not paying for this because I'd get my money back and I'd leave. And it was funny too, that when I look back on it after I went and got my instructor ratings, and the FAA teaches in their in the syllabi and the handbooks all these instructor professionalism characteristics, and I'm like, these guys took this list and did the opposite of every single one because they were just they were jerks, and they were just crazy. A lot of them were Vietnam vets, and they had issues with PTSD and they were super knowledgeable, but man, if you caught them on the wrong day, they would make you pay for it. So it was,
well, you made it. You made it. You survived it. Thank goodness for that SEER training. It sounds like a little bit of the torture from SEER training ended up in the cockpit and you knew how to deal with it. Don't hit me anymore, please. I'll tell you what you want to know.
I know.
That's funny.
I remember we'd get back from our flights and you'd go talk to your buddies and you're like, dude, is your guy mean to you too? And you go ask him like, hey, what are you doing in auto rotation? Like he just tells me to hold my RPM, and I don't know what are we doing? And he's like, I don't know, man. My guy just yells at the airspeed the whole time. And you're just like, you're collectively trying to figure it out together because they're just, I hope it's better. I hope a lot of those guys have retired, but I was like, I was not learning much when I was there because you're just trying to survive to the next day and make
valuable lessons for later on in your career, huh, Tim?
Yeah.
Oh man,
I learned a lot what not to do.
Now, because you were going kind of through the medical route to get to flight school, did that mean that you knew you were going to be a medevac pilot, or was there a chance you were going to do something else? So how'd that work?
No, thankfully, it meant I was actually tracked for Blackhawks already.
Okay.
So
you knew when you got there, you knew that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was great because that's one of the big pressures of flight school is if you're an untracked aviation officer or untracked warrant officer, at the end of those three phases, your primary instrument and then your basic warfighter, that's where you get ranked, racked and stacked, one through whatever. And then it's funny. I have a funny story about that too, because there's a selection day, aircraft selection day, and they bring you in. And at my group, there's probably 60 of us, 50, 60 of us that made it to that point. And medevac, we already knew what we were getting. If you were a National Guard or reserve unit, you actually knew what you were getting because you applied directly from that unit, right? So they had a spot for Apaches or Blackhawks, and you already knew what you were flying. So what they do is they look at the requirements of the big Army, and they just determine how many flight slots for each airframe are going to be available for this particular group. And we already, all of us that knew what we were getting, we were like, this is a stress-free day for us. We're good to go, but we still had to go. So what they did was they wrote out each airframe on the whiteboard and then put tick marks for how many slots were in each aircraft. And they did a big drum roll, and then they lifted up the blinds, and that's your choices. So I think at the time they still had the OH-58 in Kiowa. So there were only like 2 spots for that, which is common. There's not very many, and they were about to start phasing them out. There were a handful, 3 or 4 for Chinooks, because once again, there's actually not a ton of Chinooks. There's only one company of them per brigade. So there's 3 or 4 for them. And then there were a ton of Blackhawk and Apache spots. So most of the guys were either going Blackhawks or Apaches. That was the wants and needs of the Army. So they go down the list, right? And they call off, Smith, Brennan, you're already tracked, cross you out. Okay, next guy. They just keep going down the list. And then you get to the end of the list, and the last, 20 guys, there's like a couple Blackhawk spots and then a lot of Apache spots. So whenever you meet an Apache guy, just know he might have been the bottom of his class, because that was all that was left for him to pick. Because as cool as they are, they're all right, performance wise. They always tell you, guns and machine guns and missiles and but they have a lot of issues that they've been working on for years with performance and availability. So that's what we were laughing about. It was like, all these guys, the guys with the guns on the helicopters are the bottom of the class. They're going to be flying these around with. Better steer clear.
How many hate letters are being written right now, Jack, to our podcast?
It's just Apache guys.
Well, if you really want to rile them up, you ask them how do they figure out who sits up front to get the back rub? That'll really set them off.
Ooh, ouch! We'll have to remember that.
Shots fired.
Yeah, shots fired.
I have some good buddies that are Apaches, and it's friendly inter-aircraft rivalry. Of course, but some of them are like, they're little tools about it. So
yeah, that's funny. That's great. So just talk about. I mean, man, I can't believe how far we are already. But give us your overall thoughts on the Blackhawk from you. Now, I want to hear what Tim thinks of the Blackhawk and what you liked about it, what maybe you didn't care about it, and how for the mission you were doing, what you liked about it.
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
I thought it was a phenomenal aircraft. And, I was fortunate to be tracked Blackhawk, so I didn't have to stress about what I was getting, but that's what I wanted to fly anyway. So it worked out really well for me, getting to just go straight to it. But it's a phenomenal platform. It truly is a jack of all trades as far as utility work goes. So, you can use it obviously for troop transport, short haul, long line. You can use it for the medevac platform. Even the 160th puts machine guns and missiles on there. Some of theirs, the DAT birds. So it really is a utility bird. I mean, anything you want to do with it, you can do with it. So, it has a great performance margin. It's fast. It's maneuverable. I mean, some of the stuff we used to do with them, you'd be surprised how nimble it actually is for a big girl. So I loved it. I love flying it. It was awesome. Every chance you got to get in one and go fly around, it's just a great aircraft, well designed, durable. I mean, we used to beat the crap out of them in training in Afghanistan, and they just kept on running.
Yeah.
So even if they take a couple bullet holes, they're still flying and working great. So I am a huge fan of the 60. It's hands down my favorite aircraft I've flown. So yeah, I don't have enough good things to say about it. My only issue we had wasn't anything to do with the aircraft itself, but some of the overthinking that went into some of the features they would put on them. You're like, why did you do that? You know, it didn't make any sense. And a great example of that is, so when I went through flight school, I learned in the Alpha Lima model, which is the old steam gauge, if you think of it that way, steam gauge with an old GPS unit, very, primitive. It was largely unchanged for, the 80s, since the 80s. So, but right as I was getting done, I had been slotted by that point to go to Fort Drum and go to the 10th Mountain Combat Aviation Brigade, and they were scheduled to get the 60 mics, which is the digital cockpit version of the Black Hawk, shortly after I got there. So I was supposed to get there in the spring, and then by summer they were getting all their mic models delivered. So what I did was I actually did my transition at Fort Drum. They had a transition team that came to the base, and we did classes. And so I learned the mic model there, but flight school is all Alpha Lima. So, but when they gave us the HH version, which is the search and rescue medevac platform, they modified the back quite a bit. So they actually put in, instead of, if you can imagine, an empty cabin where in a Black Hawk, typically the crew chiefs will sit up front behind the pilot seats with their door gunner windows, and then in the back seating or just open area. Well, what they did was they moved the crew chief, in the case of us, a medic seat, all the way to the back wall. And then they installed 3 litter pans on each side, so 6 total, that actually would go up and down through wall controls. So on the surface, you think, oh, wow, you could put 6 litter patients in there, maybe a 7th across the back, and you can evac a ton of people. Well, practically speaking, what if the guy on the top needs CPR? What if the guy in the middle needs a new dressing? It was wildly impractical to actually give patient transport unless you're just transporting a bunch of sleeping people. So
Yeah.
it was a good idea, but nobody seemed to have asked the guys that actually flown it and use it, because when we were downrange in Afghanistan, we stripped all that crap out. The unit,
Yeah.
I'll give credit to the unit ahead of us did it, but we were going to do the same thing. Just get rid of all that crap. We don't need it. So if my only, I guess the only downside you could think of had to do with some of the engineering features or designs or things you didn't need. Like there was an onboard oxygen tank generator. We have little onboard bottles you just put with the patient, right? You don't need that thing. So there was a lot of some good idea fairies floating around when they designed that thing. And in the end, we just had to adjust and modify like we did. But that'd kind of be my only downside, I guess, if you could call it that.
Yeah. So then you were off to Fort Drum, New York, upstate New York.
Yeah.
Talk about the flying experience there, and particularly the environment, because it's pretty unique there. It has some harsh realities in flying. As you kind of touched on earlier. Talk about that and how that benefited you even to this day.
Fort Drum's located about 60 miles north of Syracuse. So if you think of where New York is, it has that kind of L-shaped curve at the top. It's basically right up the coastline on the lake there, 60 miles north. So there you get that lake effect snow where you have this cold, moist air blowing across the lakes, and then as soon as it lands, it turns into snow. So you get these insanely thick snowstorms, heavy snowstorms rolling through the area all the time in the winter. And when you're in the summer, it's constantly thunderstorms, and like I mentioned earlier, it's like I averaged it out. Literally every third day was a weather day for some reason. So that did limit some of our days of flying, but it also meant we had a lot of opportunities to go out and fly actual weather and instruments. And I took advantage of that as much as I could, because the mic model was a fully autopilot flight director coupled aircraft. And some of the guys, especially the elder statesmen in the unit, they didn't like it because it was different and they weren't super familiar with it. And they weren't keen to file an IFR flight plan and go out. But when I got the time when I could actually dictate what we did on a flight, I did it every chance we got. If there were clouds, we're going in them. Unless there's a hazard, thunderstorms or something like that, we're going to go fly instruments and get the experience and the time. And particularly with that area, inadvertent IMC is a big concern. So and we had brief procedures, but if you don't practice them ever, you're not going to be proficient when the time comes. So we did practice them a lot, but then, I actually used them twice in my life to get out of no crap IFR that blows over you. Or it happened in Afghanistan. We had a thunderstorm catch up to us going back to base, and it was tense, but it was not that difficult to deal with. You just kind of, okay, it's in it. We've done this a bunch of times. You got the weather experience already. We know the procedures. And both times it was almost casual, like relaxing. And by the end of it, it was, you get your clearance, tell them your inadvertent IMC, you punch in, set up your approach and get back to the ground. And then you just go land and shut down. So I'm thankful for that experience and flying in those conditions, because it's definitely paid dividends actually using it, to really get us out of trouble a few times. And then also, I haven't had to do it here, but there's been times where I've thought about in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, if things go crazy around here in Phoenix and the monsoons, I know the altitude, I'm going to the procedure, I'm going to transition the instruments, I'm going to get it coupled up. Having already done it is really helpful and gives me some peace.
And it was casual, and you were confident. You're confident right now because of practice and training, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, so that's so key. Everybody talks about inadvertent IMC, a lot, as they should, because it kills a lot of people. And but if you practice and if you train and if you stay current with those skills and knowledge and experience, it can be casual. I mean, that's a pretty, strong word for that, because it's not casual. I mean, you've been in it twice. It was not casual, but it felt casual because of your background and what you had done before, right? Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, and maybe a better word for it would be, it felt more routine.
There you go. Okay.
Because there was a pucker factor. You're like, oh, this is real. But you just start working through your steps that you practiced and you're familiar with it, and you just don't panic. Stay calm, fly the aircraft. And with having enough time doing it and all that practice, it just flowed into a routine. And it was stressful, but it wasn't overwhelmingly disorienting. You maintain control, brief the crew, you have your co-pilot backing you up, and it works. But had you not practiced, or you're way out of practice, then it's your panic factor is going to be a lot higher.
Then it's not casual or routine. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And right. I mean, we hear the stories of people that have gotten in. It's many don't get out of that. We don't ever hear their stories because they don't survive it. And it's because they weren't trained for it, or they trained but weren't current. Such an important thing to talk about.
Your statement on training applies here as well, Jack. We usually talk about that statement as it relates to TFOs and folks on the ground, but talk about that just briefly. Give us your saying and how that relates in this particular.
It certainly applies. When the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has passed. That's absolutely true in everything we do in life. But inadvertent IMC, wow. I mean, it's perfect for that. That saying is perfect for inadvertent IMC. So you don't know when that time to perform arrives. If we had crystal balls, we could look into it and say, oh, today, when we go out flying, sometime during this flight, this is going to happen. No, that's not what happens. It surprises you. And so if that's true, and it's true with lots of things in life, we've got to prepare for that for every flight, every single flight. It's blue skies. You can see 1,000,000 miles. Okay. Should I still be prepared today for inadvertent IMC? The answer is yes, because what if you get sent someplace up onto a mountain peak and all of a sudden something changed in the weather and now you end up getting in it. So that's why it's so important to talk about regularly and to train for and to be current on, so that when that happens, and it will, you are ready and you are making it a routine. Follow the steps, like Tim said. Just follow the steps. What do I got to do here? Okay, I'm in it. I'm not happy about it. This is scary, but I've been trained for this. I've been prepared for this because I've thought about it a lot. So yeah, it applies to everything in life, everything in police work, and certainly everything in the pilot world. But inadvertent IMC is such a perfect example. It's cool that you brought that up, John, because it really applies.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get into something and go, oh, I'm in it. What do I do?
Yeah.
While you're thinking, what do I do? Your attitude in that helicopter has already changed dramatically, probably. And you might be seconds away from flying into terrain. You cannot think about it. You have to react to it.
Hope is not a strategy.
No. And what Tim described, he's been in it twice. And it just kind of sneaks up on you a little bit. Something happens. But if you're prepared, good to go. That doesn't mean that it's still going to be successful, right? I mean, you can be prepared and still make a mistake or have something else happen. But the point is that it can be routine. It can be casual if you prepared for it. So
you turn an emergency into a procedure. The difference in the mindset, and those are two different things. In an emergency, you're panicking, right? And in a procedure, you're kind of going through the mental checklist of things to do. Yep. So that's a great way to think through things, and I think you illustrated that well in that. Taking the opportunities to train and not just be like, it's another weather day. We're not going to go fly right now.
Yep. Being ready, having done it before. Cause you see videos like in cockpit videos of inadvertent IMC, and man, it just gives you the chills. And some of them have terrible endings, and you just walk away and just go, man, I'm glad I watched that, but I don't like that I had to watch that. It was awful because they didn't react properly. They did panic, or they were not prepared, or they had never done it before. That's where simulators have become so valuable. I mean, we've talked about that before, about the loft simulator, how the number one thing about a great simulator is that you can practice what we're talking about, and the chances of you coming out of that successfully increase dramatically if you've done it 30 times in the past couple months, Yeah. So that's great. I want to shift gears a little bit. Just give us briefly, tell us about the 10th Mountain Division.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
So the 10th Mountain Division was actually formed during World War II, and originally it was based out of Colorado, and they designed it as a ski division. So the goal there was forming a fighting unit that could actually fight in the Italian Alps and the mountainous wintertime country of Italy and Austria and Germany and all that. So when you see the 10th Mountain now, it has crossed daggers or the bayonets, but it used to actually be skis on a little powder keg, we call it. But then they ended up moving to Fort Drum, New York in the 80s, I think it was, which is a bummer. I'd rather been in Colorado, but
right near Vail. It was right near Vail. There's still remnants of that base. And even in Vail, there are statues dedicated to 10th Mountain, within the community there. It's really cool.
Yeah, so they moved to Fort Drum, New York, and then ended up transitioning what they call a light infantry division. So that means there's no tanks, no heavy armor. They're designed to be, when they deploy, to be mobile and lighter capabilities than like a heavy mechanized, armored division or something like that. So, and part of that division, they were made up of 3 different combat brigades, which were infantry units. Then you had a support brigade, headquarters element, and then you had an aviation brigade, which every major division has an aviation brigade attached to it now. They did a big restructuring during the War on Terror to kind of make these more self-contained, self-sufficient, smaller size bite chunk pieces that could go into an area, occupy, fight, secure it with the assets they needed. Versus, okay, we were going to put an infantry brigade here. Oh, we got to bring in aviation. We got to bring in supply from these guys. It's all just self-contained and more of a quick deployment format. So being in the medevac, that's part of the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade. So we fell under the General Support and Aviation Battalion. And then there were also an assault battalion, attack recon battalion, and then attack helicopter battalion, and then us, the GSAB. So within my battalion, there was us as the medevac company, and that's also where you'll find the VIP company with Blackhawks, designed for the VIP flights, flying the high-ranking officials, generals around. And then you also had the heavy lift company, our Chinook company. So, so within the brigade, we're kind of the redhead stepchildren. We're kind of a mishmash of different aircraft, and I think we had a little more relaxing atmosphere than some of the other battalions. But yeah, I graduated from flight school, finished up the Black Hawk transition in February of 2012. Yeah. And then reported in March. So when I got to my unit, the company had just come back in the summertime, so about 6 or 7 months beforehand, from Afghanistan on their last deployment. And at the time, every time the units came back from a deployment, basically half the people were going to be moving on, and then you'd get a whole new group of people coming in to reset, and then we were scheduled to redeploy again a year later. So I was part of that new wave coming into the company as a platoon leader for the medevac, and showed up there to join the team and start getting ready to deploy. But
nice.
That's kind of the structure of the units, and then just started the pre-deployment process.
Before we get to going down range, I just want to ask you briefly, because I'm very curious about this personally, because I've seen them in action in Colorado. You went to the high altitude power management course, which was in the area of Vail again, kind of west of there. Talk about that course and what it is, and then how has benefited you even to this day. Again, I'm thinking of the things that you've done that I know that you still use. I mean, even in Maricopa County today, I am positive, and I've not asked you about this, but I'm positive that there are things from that course that you are using to this day in a Bell 429 in Maricopa.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. The material is still relevant. So we call it HATS is the acronym for it, Army High Altitude Aviation Training Site, which is out of the Eagle, Colorado airport. And it was created as a high altitude course to train pilots and crew members for operating in the high altitude environments of Afghanistan. So I forget its exact inception date, but after 9/11, when we started going into Afghanistan, the average elevation can go anywhere from about 1,700 MSL in the Jalalabad, closer down to the coastline area, up to 10,000 feet or more from some of these landing areas. And most of it is at least 5,000 plus in mountainous, harsh terrain of the Hindu Kush. So before that, the Army had been training for Europe. We had been training for the potential Cold War outbreak with Russia, flat rolling hills, maybe some mountains in the Alps you might get into. But overall, the training focus was not on high altitude flying. And very quickly, they realized that we did not have adequate training to understand power, performance, and operating in a mountainous environment. So this course was created as a way to train pilots and crew members on how to deal with that. And its big emphasis is power management. So knowing how to calculate performance, knowing how performance can change, what factors change it, your density altitudes. And the big thing I took away from it is knowing before you go, right? So, and that's the big part. Not only the techniques, we learned mountain flying techniques, wind assessment tools, wind behavior, how's it going to work through the nooks and crannies of the oddly shaped mountainous terrain you might deal with. But I remember the thing I still use all the time is the calculation and power performance and management. So anytime we're flying around in the county, we actually do have some areas, our highest peak will land up around 7,000 feet, potentially higher if the person's stuck up there. And the average mountainous altitude is anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 feet just within the county. And then you add in summertime, So our DA's at 7,000 or 8,000 feet, and we've got 3 or 4 people on board, and we're trying to hoist, and the aircraft's not happy. So all that experience in the Army was super useful when I came to the unit, and looking at, okay, it looks a little different. There's a lot less snow, but it's very similar as far as techniques and power management. So trying to figure out how much power should I have when I get there, and then actually checking that once you get there, instead of jumping right into or rushing into a rescue. Take the time to recon the site, set the aircraft up, position it, check your power, check your margins. If it's not good, don't let their emergency now become our emergency, because I chose to get us in a spot we can't get out of. So it was an awesome course. It was a week long, really intensive flying, and you get to see some beautiful scenery flying up there in the mountains. So I was thankful. Not everybody got to go to it, but I was one that did. So I was very appreciative of that.
Yeah, if you're ever in the Vail area in the summer or winter, you'll see Black Hawks flying around all the time, and that's what they're doing. I mean, they're that course. Everybody I've talked to that's gone to that has said incredible. It's amazing. You go through that and go, why didn't I know this? Last week. Right? It's just eye opening, and but I love that it benefits you to this day. That's really cool.
Oh yeah,
and I knew it would. Because anybody, I mean, power management. That's what flying a helicopter is all about. Even at sea level, it's about power management. You got to be careful. Now, the higher you go, the more risk, and the more you know about it, the better off you're going to be. Very cool. All right, now let's touch on it, because we want to really get into the Maricopa stuff coming up here. But talk about your deployment. You went downrange to Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain. Talk about that tour, and if there's something that jumps out at you about that tour that was really eye opening, or something that you learned by being down there that you don't think you would have learned without being in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So we ended up deploying to Afghanistan in March of 2013. And at the time, Afghanistan was divided up into what they called regional commands, or RCs. So you had North, East, Southwest, and West. And we were going to the RC East, which was where all the hot spots are. So that's where Kabul, Bagram, Ghazni, Shank, the raid out of J-Bad for Osama bin Laden. I mean, it's on the border with Pakistan. So we were going back to where my company had just come from, in some of the same bases and areas. So that was great in a way, because one, as a new pilot that wants to get into the suck and experience it, we knew we were going to get some action. And then also having the soldiers and crew chiefs, medics, pilots that had been there already, training you up and telling you the stories and the experience of being there was amazing too, because I could pick their brains about expectations and what are we getting into. And then when you got there, it was all the same bases that they knew from last time. So they knew where everything was. And that was a great resource for me as a first time deployment for me, them getting to kind of reassume. Some of the guys showed me places where they carved their initials in the base when we got back there. And, it was like going back to a worse home than when you left it. But, it's, for the uninitiated, it sounds bad, but I think especially other soldiers and even officers understand that it was a lot of fun. My most enjoyable time in the Army was that 9 months in Afghanistan, because we got to do the mission. And all the BS of the Army, the garrison life, disappeared, because all of a sudden it's real. And that's always the tough part, with the military, is when you're not at war, which is awful. I'm not minimizing that. But when you're in peacetime, you're not doing anything you really want to do. You signed up to do a job, and unless the wars are going on or you're in a conflict somewhere, you don't get to do it. And that was especially true on the flight side. Peacetime, I'd be lucky to get one flight a week, but in Afghanistan, I'm flying every day and multiple times a day, sometimes depending on how many calls we got. So, and then for me, being a officer, I was starting to realize maybe I didn't like being an officer by this point, because I wasn't getting to fly all the time, and I was getting pulled off to do other stuff that I didn't want to do. But I said I'd go to Afghanistan, I'd come back, and then figure out my life after that. So So when we deployed, a medevac company is actually designed to be split up into smaller teams that cover a larger area. So a typical company is commanded by a captain, an O3, which is a mid-level officer rank. And normally a captain will have 12 aircraft, 100 people. That's a company element. Well, the medevac is designed to be split up into all kinds of different individual detachments. So our company commander is actually a major. And then we had 4 medevac teams or platoons that was each led by a captain, like myself at the time when I got there. So we actually were split up from between 4 different bases to cover all of that RC East region. And the doctrine was kind of used if you took a base and drew a 40-mile diameter circle around it, or 40-mile radius circle around it, that's our range. And all those bases would overlap. So that way we could meet that golden hour requirement that if we get a call within an hour, that patient better be back at the surgical team getting treatment. So that's how we kind of divided everything up.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, aeromedical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details. Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, Sol 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
Thank you for listening to part 2 with Tim Brennan of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. When Tim's aviation journey took him to Arizona, Quantum Helicopters was fortunate to hire him as an instructor, and eventually he became the chief instructor pilot. Maricopa County was the next stop for Tim, which leads to an incredible desert swiftwater rescue. Thank you to all of our listeners and all of our incredible sponsors. Stay safe, and we'll catch you the next time on the Hangar Z podcast.